Hello and welcome to the birth of a new dimension. On today's episode, I will be speaking about the concept of peasants of the mind and also the different type of crafts that have been visiting this planet and have been interpreted as UFOs, talking about the difference between a physical object and something that would be understood to be closer to a dimensional or energetic portal and the significance of those two things. So first up, starting with the idea of different types of crafts that different consciousnesses might use in order to visit this place. And the idea for what I'm speaking about right now came from a very brief exchange that I had on Facebook, where a person was actually coming from the viewpoint that to find and investigate a clank metal spaceship would give greater validity to the UFO phenomenon. Brief pause. So first of all, I learned a lot from interacting with this other person because I learned about the materialistic and objective viewpoint. It's not the viewpoint that I espouse myself, so I sometimes have to remember, like living in a foreign country, like, oh, this is the way some people do it here. So some people around these parts actually believe that if something is a physical object that you can perceive with your five senses, that it is more quote-unquote real or has a greater presence than something which is a piece of pure energy that cannot be perceived with the five senses or cannot be measured with the various apparatuses that science has developed up to this point. And light would be the only thing that the objective materialist validates as a physical phenomenon that we can perceive with our five senses and which science can certainly measure, but which has what could be considered magical or non-physical properties that are worth looking into. All right. And all this because it is considered amongst some UFO enthusiasts to be like the Holy Grail to find an actual physical vessel or an actual physical artifact. Because, oh my goodness, I also have to be constantly reminded that many people here in this time and place do not believe in non-terrestrial intelligence and barely can believe in or perceive in the intelligence of beings that are right here on this earth in the physicality in this dimension. So I have to always be reminded that not everyone here has the capacity to even consider that there's intelligence elsewhere, and that many people in deep hubristic pride still do believe that humanity is the pinnacle of organization in terms of being an organism, and the pinnacle in terms of intelligence in terms of organizing one's thoughts. So not only are humans not the most intelligent form of organized thought on the planet, humans are not the only form of intelligence that exists in the entire cosmos. Let's all laugh. Ah ha ha ha, of course, what a ridiculous assertion. I dropped my monocle. No, there is an entire pervasive tapestry of consciousness which is woven into every single atom, subatomic particle, cell of your body, and event and thought in reality. We are in a sea of consciousness. So the idea that the little tiny peephole that is called humanity and the perspective of humans in this biological bodysuit, that is the only perspective in the giant mosaic is quite laughable. So no, there is a complex mosaic of perspectives that come from a variety of intelligent organisms. In last week's broadcast, I spoke about the different types of extraterrestrials, that there are some who are technology users. And the reason why they use technology is because they did not leave the source, the zeroth dimension from which we all emanate from. They did not leave the source on a bridge of love. They left and didn't follow the great musical score of the great composer. They played out of time their own notes according to their own choosing, which, ordinarily I'm very all about the jazz. I'm all about the creativity and innovation. However, when we are working with the tapestry of consciousness in the cosmos, it's so complex that in order to be a good musician and be an improvisational musician, you have to be processing a ton of information at one time. It's just like in playing regular music, in order to effectively collaborate with other musicians, you can play around that main chord as long as you stick to the notes. But if you go too far out of those notes and, start to play something down here, then it might not fit in very well. This is what we're talking about. In order to be an improviser with the mind, with consciousness, and to have it actually fit in harmoniously with the rest of what's going on, all of the previously created events, personas, energies, particles, and forces, it takes a great deal of artistry to do that. So I'm describing now that there are beings that chose to be bad musicians and just play a bunch of notes like this, do whatever the heck they wanted, and that created perturbations in the field. Just in the same way that if you dive into a perfectly still pool of water, there will be reverberations, and even in a pool of water, those reverberations will cause an interference pattern, areas of light and areas of shadow. And this is essentially what we have been experiencing in terms of consciousness. There are areas of light, which is consciousness is gathered together, and there's a lot of it. There's a lot of light or information. When I use the word light, you can play a mind game with yourself, and you can exchange the word light for information. Just like a fiber optic cable can carry your computer information in the form of little light pulses, okay? And then, of course, there's also darkness, the absence of light, the absence of information. This is called ignorance or lack of consciousness. If you could think of the emanation of a photon as being like a very long string, like unfurling, unfurling, unfurling. And in some places, the string bunches up and makes kind of like knots and tangles, and that's called light. And if you get enough of it together, you get matter. But there are places then where the string isn't, because the string is all bunched up over here. It means that the string isn't over here. And those areas where the string isn't, that's darkness. And it's also ignorance. It's lack of consciousness. In the same way that a bat sends out sonar, sound waves that bounce off of its environment and return to itself as the source. And then it makes complex computations, what I sent out versus what I received, and then builds a picture of the world around it according to that. So, too, does the stellar network send out photons. And those photons are like the sensory apparatus of a much, much larger entity. And when those photons travel in an unimpeded, uninterrupted trajectory, they simply continue through space, and they never slow down. And if they are impeded in their trajectory, they might become matter. They might be caught by a chloroplast, and through the process of photosynthesis, turn from light into matter and lose a lot of speed in the process. Or that light might bounce off of a solid object and come into my eyeball and stimulate my retina, and then it might be transformed into a neural impulse, in which case it is literally trapped in my body during the lifespan of this body, of this consciousness. When that happens to a photon, the emitter of the photon, in this case our sun or other stars, they sense it, just like the little bat that sent out its sonar. The sun senses, look, this little photon has been waylaid on its journey, and now it's doing this and this and this. So literally, all of our energy, all of our consciousness, all of our resources is emanated from the stellar network. The timelines upon which we exist are emanated by the stellar network, and we borrow this energy, and we're supposed to broadcast it back in real time and or send it back as like a completed hard drive at the end of our experience here. Now, last week I spoke about those unsophisticated extraterrestrials who have to use technology in order to house their consciousnesses in the physical realm, because they didn't come here on a bridge of love. So that means they don't have organic multicellular bodies to house their consciousnesses. They're very sophisticated. They built artificial containers for consciousness. And I made the distinction, artificial containers. And artifice and art in itself is not, by definition or perforce, evil. It is all about the way that something is applied. So I can make a picture of a flower that is not evil, it is artifice. Many things that were started as a form of artifice, something that is not natural, became seamlessly integrated into the natural world, and we now accept them as just integrated part of the natural world. They actually began as a form of artificial technology. And I'm speaking now about DNA. DNA is like a way of writing things down that on tablets or pieces of paper or papyrus scrolls that cannot be harmed, or let's say that cannot be burned or discarded in the way a physical object can be discarded. And this is a way of transferring information from generation to generation. And chlorophyll or chloroplasts, these are two examples of something that was created as artifice. Like I, as an artist, pick up my paintbrush and I intentionally dip it into the red paint and I intentionally paint a red flower. That's really different than just, like a red blob of iron oxide colored water falling on a surface and just making a mark. That's different. That's just a mark that is created by the natural world. And I'm talking about something that's created by an intelligent creator, like, an artist. So, and we do not consider DNA to be evil. We do not consider chlorophyll to be evil. Both of these biological technologies fulfill a role. That's why they were developed or created. And they were created according to the beautiful musical score of the cosmos. This is beautiful music. It's conforming to the pattern of consciousness and events that we are supposed to conform to. So that is why DNA became so seamlessly integrated into the natural world and has been so widely adopted by all of these different organisms. And it is why, basically, the structure of our biosphere, the totality of living biological organisms on our planet, that structure only is maintained because of harmony. These are all like musicians that all play together. We don't have the microbial realm fighting against the plant realm. We actually have them working together, microbes unlocking nutrients like at a molecular level in the soil so that plants can then grow. And if those microbes didn't do their job, the plants literally couldn't grow. And also, if those microbes didn't do their job in our own intestines, then we would not be able to digest the food that we have. Literally, when we digest, we do the opposite of plants. Plants take something that is not solid, light, pure energy, and they turn it into something solid. We take something solid, and we turn it into something that is pure energy. In this case, kinetic or caloric energy to move our physical bodies, and also consciousness energy, the energy that makes your neurology think and be aware. So the least sophisticated beings in the cosmos are the ones that have to use technology. The most sophisticated, highest consciousness, highest energy, highest frequency entities in the cosmos are kind of like the way we humans, as domesticated humans, look at wild, undomesticated animals. Like, let's look at a baby deer, because I have deer in my yard. A deer is born. It does not require anything other than the equipment that we would commonly call its birthday suit, what it came out of the womb with, and the resources of the natural world. So it has a mother to take care of it. So it has access to milk and nutrients. This is the idea of mammals taking care of their young. And it also has access to food, oxygen, and water in the environment around it. So when you're born, you don't have to come here like with a spacesuit that contains all of the oxygen that you're ever going to breathe for your whole life, or all of the energy that you're going to need for your whole life. You actually get to come here and eat. That's called taking in energy. So we come here with a certain amount of resources, and we know that there's resources for us to use here. And we can use those resources because they are available on a bridge of love. So food, literally to digest food, you have to be vibrating at the level of love. when babies, little tiny infants are born, and when they cannot thrive, there's literally a syndrome that is called failure to thrive. Like milk or formula is being put into their body system, but they're not actually absorbing it and digesting it and using it to grow and to live, and some of them die. And the reason for that is that those babies are not being loved. There literally in hospitals was found babies that had failure to thrive when they were given love, like nurturance, like skin-to-skin contact, cuddling against someone's chest, stroking. These are like, little tiny infants that were always in an incubator. When they were given actual physical love is when they began to be able to digest their food. So this is just one example that love is not just an airy-fairy hippie ideal. It is an actual tone. Let me play it on this 432 hertz instrument. This is the tone of A at 432 hertz. And just as that is a tone, there's a tone that the energy center of your heart chakra on your body makes when there is an equal giving and receiving of energy. And that is called unconditional love. And when mothers are nursing their infants, they are literally giving out energy from their heart chakra to their infants, and the infants are also reflecting that beautiful energy back to their mothers and saying, I love you, mother, thank you for this beautiful milk. And this mothers report that the act of nursing their child is very pleasurable. It's very pleasant. It is not burdensome or painful or unhappy making. It's the opposite. So this is a great example of the blissful feelings that come from an equal giving and receiving. And if it weren't a blissful equal partnership, the mammalian experiment would never have succeeded. If it was always like, oh my God, I got babies that are nursing off of me and it's not a pleasant sensation and they're always taking more than they're giving, then that would be considered out of balance and mothers wouldn't do it. Mothers continue doing it literally because it is in balance. Mothers receive as much goodness as they are sending out, and that is what keeps it sustainable. So this is just one example of love being necessary in order to eat food. And we are mammals. We're wearing this mammalian body right now. That's why I used the example of nursing as nurturance. However, there are many other examples of love that are in the non-mammalian world, but they might not be interpreted through your mammalian anthropomorphic interpretation system as love. Like, I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but the idea of a mother spider carrying around her little babies in an egg sac, and if they all hatch out of their egg sac and then eat their mother, you think as a mammal, you're like, oh, how horrendous, how awful. But as an insect, they do not necessarily think of it in that way because they are working with batting averages. They're like, oh, I had 1,000 babies and I want them to eat me and use my, sacrifice my body so that they can all stay alive. And, we're working with batting averages here. I hope that 50% of my offspring stay alive. Like that's a different, if we applied that to mammals, we'd say that's a monster. Like, I hope 50% of my children survive. Like, it's terrible. But we're working on different biological realms, and so we have different value systems. So I always say that not to apply your anthropocentric value system and project it onto the entire realm. And that's a bit of a tangent. The idea is that if you have a physical, organic, multicellular body, you live on love. And that love is in the form of the plants and the animals and the water and the air that you ingest. And that just ingesting those substances is not equivalent of ingesting love, because babies that are just given food without given love and contact and that type of emotional sustenance do not thrive. So all this in order for you to understand that the beings that left the source not on a bridge of love have a totally different system of nourishment than you and I and the stellar network do. The beings that don't eat love, they can only eat something that is less than love, a distorted, entropically diminished. When I say entropically, I do not mean from the tropics of the Caribbean. I mean entropy, the loss of energy that light, just as light can be slowed down in its trajectory, in its journey, and become something else and literally solidify as matter, so too can other energy, love, be slowed down in its trajectory and become denser emotions. And the denser emotions I have usually characterized as negative, but we cannot be too judgmental. Everything has its place. Every color in my palette on my paint box has its place. I just do not use brown very much in the rainbow, but it can be very effective in some, aspects of shading and tonality. So the denser emotions that love is dragged down into are emotions such as sorrow, grief, sadness, jealousy, envy, hatred, lust, even romantic attraction. And I'm not judging or characterizing any of these as evil. These are just denser emotions. Literally, when we ascend and raise our energy to higher levels, we do not occupy these levels of denser emotion any longer. This is why, if you've had the experience of having a near-death experience or interacting with a person who has passed over, they have died and gone to the other side, they don't bring with them any of the anger, fear, hurt, disappointment, all of those heavier, denser emotions. That sludge all gets left behind. And, grandmother, when she transitions to the other side, she doesn't bring with her any, acrid disappointment that you didn't turn out to become a lawyer like your other family members, or who disappointed her, didn't go into the family business, whatever. Grandmother leaves all of that behind, and all that she brings with her is really the love and the light and the sweetness, because those are on a frequency that can literally make it into the next realm. This is very similar to traveling upon the stellar network of consciousness. So, beings who travel on a clank metal spaceship travel in that way because they don't have the sophisticated capacity to gather up all of their physical energy and all of their non-physical energy of pure consciousness, put it into a ball and shoot that ball into a connection to the nearest star, and in so doing connect to the stars that are everywhere and be able to come out the other side in any place or in any time or any multiple combinations of places and times that they choose. And in so doing, understand this is like taking a sun bath on a magnificent scale. It is a washing away of all that is temporal, all that is derived from being submerged in time. So you can't take it with you. You can take with you your basic essence and certain loving life experiences. Love can be transported across these dimensional barriers or membranes or interstices. However, all of the denser stuff and all of your temporal ego stuff gets left behind. So if you're like a very rich, fancy person and you derive your identity from having a mansion, wearing long flowing silks and having tons of gold jewelry, and you're like, well, if I hop on the stellar network, I have to leave my mansion behind. I cannot take my gold jewelry with me. I cannot take my silk, my flowing garments. I cannot take my bank account with me. All of that is left behind. The only things that I take with me are things like, this is what I think, this is what I believe, this is what I have learned. Or things like, this is my creativity, the capacity to sing or play music or make artwork, or ideas that you have learned or innovated, like if you invented a new machine or a new process. Those are things that you could take with you. It's not something that is a physical thing. It is something that you contain within you. But all of your sense of self and who you are, you cannot take with you. So this has to do with who would choose to travel on the stellar network, and contrasting that with who would choose to travel with a clank metal spaceship. So if you had a lot of fancy silk clothing and money and didn't want to let go of it because you were highly invested in your ego, you would say, I have to somehow find a way to build a machine that will transport me and all the trappings of my ego to another place, into another time. And then we have to say, well, what's your motivation for wanting to do that? Because if you're willing to let go of your ego, then you can travel to any place in any time. So this I spoke about in previous recordings. What is the motivation for wanting to get off of your home planet or your home world? Just like a petri dish. If you're a mold on a petri dish, you should only exit the surface of your petri dish if you have the capacity to make spores. Spores are concentrated consciousness held in stasis and in a capacity to, their life processes have been temporarily suspended, travel to the next petri dish and set up a new culture. If you don't have that capacity, the idea that you have to have a lab technician take a mold scraping, put it on a little dish, bring it across the room for you, and put you down on another little petri dish, that's the artifice. And there's nothing by definition wrong with artifice, except who's to say that you're supposed to be over there as opposed to over here or over here or over here? When you're a spore and you are lifted up off of the surface of your petri dish, you travel partially because of your own volition and partially because of the greater volition of the air currents that are in the room. And this is the dynamic partnership that we are all experiencing between ourselves as many smaller co-creators of divinity and the larger entity of consciousness within which we reside. This is what I mean when I say it's a tapestry of consciousness, and you can't just play a bunch of notes like this and expect it to sound good and fit in, because it doesn't. So if you're a little mold spore, you're supposed to jump off of the surface of your petri dish and go to the right place. And the right place might be another petri dish, or it might be, a sandwich crust that is behind the refrigerator. And you don't need a lab technician to specifically place you there. You are placed there by air currents. So let's talk about traveling on the stellar network. Let's say you decide, I am a wealthy, highly sophisticated extraterrestrial consciousness, and I want to go over there. First of all, what's my motivation for going over there? That there is some need for my talents and skills and consciousness to be over there. I am somehow invited or placed by the cosmos to be over there. And then I let go of all that I am over here, get on the stellar network and go over there. This is the idea that you're not going to be harming or oppressing the person, people, things, or objects or consciousnesses that are over there when you go there. That you will be in the right place. And if you are doing this according to your own volition, then how do you know you are placing yourself in the right place as opposed to just, creating more chaos? So there is a principle in the cosmos towards organization. Science mainly recognizes entropy and the loss of organization and the loss of energy. However, I will tell you that, like the gestation of a child is an excellent example of the non-randomness of the cosmos and the tendency to self-organize, which basically, if you get together any system and make it complex enough and give it freedom, like you're not totally controlling the behavior of the particles and forces within that system at a certain, and you let it, like press go and let it run and let it do its thing, it will organize into a stable, symmetrical system that has its own rules and inner logic and consistency. This is basically the intelligence of the cosmos expressing itself through whatever medium you make available to the cosmos. And so this is the contrast between in extraterrestrial intelligences who would use the stellar network to travel, and extraterrestrial intelligences who would build their own sophisticated technological network for traveling throughout the cosmos. And here on Earth, the objective materialist viewpoint says that if you could have an actual piece of extraterrestrial physical craft, that would be proof to other objective materialists that intelligence exists elsewhere, that space travel is real, that travelers have been coming here to this planet for a long time already. And in the conversation that I was having on social media, the other person came to my viewpoint and understood that any culture that is using clank metal technology to get off the surface of their petri dish is not very sophisticated. And if you will only validate the idea of space races or otherworldly cultures based upon physical technology, like evidence of their presence based upon physical technology, then you are, first of all, ignoring a huge portion of the intelligent network of consciousness, and also you're ignoring the more sophisticated, the ones you would actually wish to hang out with. Like the ones that travel in clank metal vehicles, those are the worst musicians. They don't know how to play their instruments at all. They're like super out of tune. And the ones that travel on the stellar network are like beautiful opera singers who have cultivated their voices and everything is a song. Like literally every thought, every energetic movement of their consciousness is part of the ballet of consciousness that is going on. So which sophisticated society would you like to interact with? The ones that are totally organized and coherent and act according to the grand composer and the musical score of the cosmos, or the ones that are like punk rock anarchists that don't follow anybody's rules, do whatever the heck they want, build their own machines to compensate, and just pretty much go around stomping on everybody's toes wherever they want to. So my answer is very clear. Of course, I would wish to interact with the beautiful, sophisticated opera singers of the galaxy and of the cosmos who fly from star system to star system on a network of consciousness and of pure love and do not require technology. So that aspect of extraterrestrial and extra-dimensional culture, we cannot say that it is from a particular place, right? Because it's interwoven throughout every place. So it is more of a values system. It's like a culture that can be made up of many people from many different places. You know, the United States is a melting pot. It is made up of many different people from many different countries that all came together. So this is what the stellar network of consciousness is like. Because this radio program is all about preparing Earth surface humans for the birth of a new dimension. That means you're going to be meeting all sorts of new people coming from new directions and on new ways of traveling that you might not have been aware of already. So this is being prepared for meeting these other people. And we cannot call them visitors because they are just as much occupants of this world as we are. This is what we're really coming down to. Like if there are Europeans, quote unquote, getting in their wooden ships and traveling across the ocean to come to visit North America, quote unquote, who's allowed to be here? Aren't there already North Americans living here? And all of this goes back to the original invasion of consciousness. And I have spoken about this as, the fall of consciousness. It is what happened in what is known in this time and place as the realm of Atlantis, that there was a culture of pristine, beautiful, pure consciousnesses that were very innocent here on the planet. And the genetic containers for consciousness were formed in a different format than they presently are. And there were consciousness invaders that came in that squashed the genetic code and brought down the emotional repertoire from one of pure unconditional love, like this A note, down into the mud and the murk down here. And that is why humanity has in its repertoire things like grief and sadness and sorrow and so much of what has been erroneously attributed to human nature. It is not human at all. It is like an overlay that has been imposed upon humanity, that humanity has been suffering with this burden for like the past 10 or 20,000 years. So it is not by definition who you are or your identity. It is who you are when you've been changed on a very basic level. Okay, so just a little bit more before I get off the topic of UFOs. So now we can understand that if any government in present reality has reverse engineered technology by getting access to some extraterrestrial artifact and then looking at the way that the technology was used and then building an earthly version of it, then what is happening is essentially you're imitating the worst musicians. Like, oh, that's a song. I'm now going to play it just like that. Like, that is not a song. That is a really, hurts my ears, non-melodic collection of notes. And just because some otherworldly race is playing music like that does not mean that you should also. So this is a really big thing in terms of birth of a new dimension, meeting other kids on the schoolyard, meeting other kids on the playground. Just because they are doing something dangerous, like whatever, jumping off of the monkey bars or popping a wheelie with their bicycle, it doesn't mean that you should do it too. So humans on Earth's surface have to be made aware that they could be, first of all, easily manipulated if an extraterrestrial technology using race came along and said, "Hi, we're a bunch of super advanced extraterrestrials. Oh, no, don't worship us as gods. Just trade with us. We'll give you this, trinket of technology. In exchange for that, you give us something that's of real value." And I will tell you, I know that sounds facetious, but it's kind of like the idea of the Europeans coming to the island of Manhattan, to the indigenous people that already lived there, and asking them to sell their island, for a very cheap price for trinkets. And both sides were condescending to the other side in that arrangement because the indigenous people did not feel it was possible to own land. So whatever they received, they felt was of great value because you can't sell land. And the other people, the Europeans, thought that they were receiving great value because they were fooling the indigenous people into selling their land for less than it was actually worth. So now we're talking about human consciousness and sexuality and creativity. Humans have been taught in this time and place not only that you're bad, you're wrong, you're a sinner. If you ever touch your genitals for pleasure or have felt pleasure in your genitals, you are a bad person. Like, these are the teachings of essentially the Judeo-Christian realm, not only Christian but also Muslim religion. The idea of making the first chakra, the red chakra, the primary chakra, that is your connection to the physical realm, an area or a source of guilt and shame and embarrassment. Those are all heavy, dense emotions. They are less than love. You were not given any body parts to be ashamed of. I will tell you this seriously. The cosmos did not give you any equipment that you are supposed to be ashamed of. That's all human, social, cultural programming. And when I say human, you now have to understand that this is human, but only as the definition of humans as they have been squashed in their genetic code. Because humans before you were squashed in your genetic code, you were not ashamed of your genitals. You were not ashamed of any of your body parts or body processes. And your body parts and processes also looked different and functioned differently. But the point that I'm making is that organic, cellular life and humans have at their disposal this amazing creative life force energy. And it is often expressed through sexual reproduction however, it is also a part of cellular reproduction in your body. So in order, and this is a realization that I just had very recently during a Reiki healing session, because I'm a walk-in. Yes, it is like 39 minutes into this broadcast. If you're new to my broadcasts, I'm a Aurora. I'm a walk-in. I'm not the original inhabitant of this physical earthly human form. I'm an abstraction from another realm. I wasn't always as articulate with words as I am now, so I came in 2001, but I wasn't exactly able to say to everyone, "Hello, I'm an abstraction from another realm, and I'm here to teach you about the flying rainbow lasagna." That it took many, many years for me to develop this capacity and to be able to make recordings like this. So yes, I am a walk-in, and I didn't understand for a very long time that the multicellular organism that I'm inhabiting, this is not, they are not divergent cells. It's not like taking some cells from over here and some cells from over here and some cells from over here and asking them to all work together. All of the cells of my body work together because they all arose or blossomed forth from the original seed, from the original fertilized egg that was, you could say, the primary cell that began this body. So the difference between sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is like when an amoeba splits itself in two, and then there's the mommy cell and daughter cell, but they're really just copies of the original mommy cell. And that is an effective way to just make one copy. If you just need to reproduce yourself, that's totally fine. But if you need to make an entirely new multicellular organism, it takes energy. And the energy is called creative life force energy. This is the energy that humans and mammals and living creatures tap into during the process of sexual reproduction. All right? So the feelings of bliss and the feelings of orgasm are evidence that the partners in sexual reproduction have aligned their energy centers to take part in the flow of energy in the cosmos. Basically, if you want to make a baby, a new multicellular organism, you need more energy than it takes than just to simply split yourself in two. That sexual energy, this is the creative life force. It is chi, it is prana, it is the vibratory language of color, line, shape, form, movement, texture, and tone. It's the harmonic language of the cosmos. So first of all, conforming to that harmonic pattern means that you can be alive, according to the definition of what life is according to science. You can have an alive body and an alive metabolism if you and your cells and your actions and your thoughts conform to those patterns of energy as it flows. If you do not conform, then what you do is you die. It means that the cells of your body cannot metabolize and you cannot maintain consciousness in your neurology. So in order to be alive, to create new life in sexual reproduction, it is necessary to conform to these patterns of consciousness, all right? Now you're starting to understand this is the bridge of love that organic multicellular beings go upon in order to exit the source. The bridge of love, it means that you are playing the music that you are supposed to according to the great composer. And if you don't play those notes, if you play notes like this, theoretically you're not supposed to be alive. Theoretically, that's like making a non-viable fetus that is all mixed up and not organized, and its cells do not conform to the pattern that they're supposed to conform to. And maybe the heart and the stomach are outside of the body instead of inside of the body. And there's a reason why they're supposed to be inside of the body. So all this idea, I am not against individuality, I'm not against punk rock, anarchy, innovating new music. It's not like that at all. It's more like saying, here in the West, there's classical Western music and these different patterns. These different patterns of sound have been established, and they've been established for a reason. It's because they have a symmetry and a strength to them that is why they're in existence. So the reason why bodies are shaped the way they are is because it works. I'm just trying to say it's been developed over a very long period of time, and there's nothing wrong with trying to innovate and do things in a new way. But when you start to play notes that are like this, you're not making music, you're not making life, you're actually making death. And when we look at the technology using extraterrestrial space races, they do not have a motivation to play their musical patterns like this. They don't have to conform to those patterns because they don't have to make cellular organic containers for consciousness. They can make any discordant sounds they want and put them into containers for consciousness. And this is the qualitative difference, and why you would not wish to interact with the beings that build clank metal spaceships and occupy them, and why you wouldn't want them to come to your planet, because that's essentially like saying we are not spiritually advanced enough to travel on the stellar network. We are not sensitive to your needs and what is good for you and good for everyone. And we're here whether you like it or not. So, because this is all about people who want disclosure and they're xenophilic as opposed to xenophobic. Xenophobic would be, I'm afraid of aliens. Xenophilic means I love aliens and want to hug them. That's awesome because I am an alien, and, nothing is better than like feeling welcomed if you are a visitor to a new place. And I'm really concerned that people aren't discerning enough and that they've been programmed by the objective materialistic world to think that a person that comes out of the sky in a metal object would be a sophisticated person. And that's actually not true. So this also speaks to the disclosure, and many people are like, we need to have full disclosure now. We want this over with, birth of a new dimension, essentially. Like, let's birth this baby. Let's bring everyone together. And we need to do it in a good way so that no one is exploited. No one is abused. We are not going to simply repeat the negative patterns of abuse that we experienced in Atlantis or in other experiences. Brief pause. One of the other topics I wanted to talk about was the idea of levels of consciousness and who is a peasant and who is a noble person in terms of levels of consciousness. And this also has to do with birth of a new dimension. The idea that in human economy, for a very long time, there was a striation or stratification amongst humans, different levels, different social strata, that it was just considered normal and right, that there would be a thin crust of elite noble people who don't have to do hard work, the mundane labors of making society and making life happen, and those people get to actually have full access to their mental capabilities, their emotions, their spirituality, their creativity, and that everyone else is meant to occupy a realm of diminished perception and diminished creativity. And so what I'm trying to say is, like, let's say the 1700s or 1600s, whatever. During that era in Europe, it was just considered normal that there was a very large group of humans that were the peasants, and they didn't get to be very clean, even though we could define that differently, but they often did not get access to the best nutrition, the best medical care, defining that for its time, or the best levels of hygiene for its time, and definitely they did not have access to the best levels of education for its time. The idea was that only a very small segment of the population actually got to be educated, actually got to know about cosmology, like where people come from, why things are set up the way they are set up, and actually have access to resources. So, there were many, many people that were not educated. They could never have thought of the things that, let's say, Isaac Newton thought of because they were busy emptying chamber pots or growing some potatoes. They didn't have the opportunity to think. And here in this time and place, 21st century United States America, the idea is that there is free public education, that there are public libraries, that if you have access to the internet, you can really self-educate at an incredibly high level. The coursework for MIT is available on YouTube. There's iTunes University. There are alt tutorials for any kind of make-it-yourself project or any kind of concept. I'm trying to say that in this time and place, a person who is alive today has the capacity, even if you don't have money, to be a noble person of the mind and of the creative realm. But many people are not taking advantage of it because there is a program towards mediocrity. And the idea that, only Stephen Hawking and high-up physicists are supposed to know about physics and cosmology and the way that the cosmos works and electromagnetism and gravity, that is, just the scientist priests know about that, and that you as a regular person are just supposed to drive a truck and then come home at the end of the day and drink beer and watch TV. This is the program of being a peasant, like an economic peasant, has now been applied to your mentality. And it doesn't have to be that way. Theoretically, in this time and place, each one of us could be as physically fit as the greatest Olympic athlete, as musically trained as, whatever, any innovator, Mozart or John Coltrane, that we could be like Edison or Tesla in inventing any kind of new instrument or technology to make life easier, that each one of us can be a Da Vinci, each one of us can be a multifaceted genius. And this is I do not give you freedom. I simply remind you that this is available to you. This is what we are supposed to be here experiencing. So many people have taken the program tacitly, just accepting that they are low-level drones of consciousness and that they don't have access to these higher levels. And the real truth is, when you begin to occupy the higher levels of your consciousness, you begin to understand that you are making reality happen. And this is a connection to the creative life force energy that organic multicellular, like mammalian beings, use in order to make new organic multicellular mammalian beings. When you have sex and you make a new person, you're tapping into the same levels of creativity that you tap into when we say you're being a genius, or you are being inspired, or you are learning something new. These are levels of consciousness that clank technology, metal using extraterrestrials don't have access to. And in the same way that the Europeans tried to put one over on the indigenous people of the island of Manhattan and try to get something for nothing, so too are the sexual, reproductive, and creative life force energies of physical multicellular humans on Earth being first diminished in their value, and then second hijacked and used and exploited for a different purpose. So on the one hand, humans are taught guilt about their primary chakra and their reproductive centers. Humans are also kept in a state of ignorance and a sense of being disempowered, like, you have an imagination, but if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. So what? You have an imagination. You can't actually make anything happen. And the idea is that it is the creative life force energy properly directed that can actually make things happen. Humans have been toying with this for a long time. They call it magic. And sometimes it's white magic, sometimes it's dark magic, sometimes it involves, capricious demons or fairies or making sacrifices or quid pro quo. Really what we're talking about is the conscious use and direction of creative life force energy. And what you're supposed to be doing is playing along with the great composer, playing when you're supposed to play, resting when you're supposed to rest, and playing the notes and the frequencies you're supposed to play. So that means creating what you're supposed to create and not creating when you're not supposed to create. This, what I'm saying right now, I do not ever wish to be taken out of context, because in much the same way that in World War II, what was called the final solution is just extermination of any group that is inconvenient to you, any religious or cultural or gender group that you just don't like. Just get rid of everyone. That's not what I'm talking about. I am trying to say that there are some organisms, some people who are alive, who are not meant to be alive. They are like threads in a tapestry that are excess threads that are woven in there that are not supposed to be there. And as soon as I say this, now it opens up the difficulty of people ask themselves, am I a thread that's not supposed to be there? Because many people feel that they're unworthy beings. And if there's a thread that's not supposed to be there, should we kill it? Brief pause. So just to clarify and make sure that my words will never be taken out of context, if there is a life or life form that has been created that is not according to the harmonic pattern of life as it flows in the cosmos, no, it's not just justifiable to kill someone or kill something, because that is not an effective solution. What we really want to do is put energy where it is supposed to be. So if there is energy out of place, let's not call it litter. Let's just be totally abstract and say energy, consciousness energy, any kind of energy might be out of place. And we want to put it where it's supposed to be. So for many of these occupiers of the interstices, what has been defined or described in the past as demons, beings who did not die well and have not returned to source and are now occupying the membrane that divides different levels of density, those beings, what is the compassionate thing to do with them or do to them? They should be sent back to the source. They should be resolved. So this is all about effective solutions. I love that John Lennon song, "There's no problems around here, only solutions." So we want to talk about cancellation waves. if you make a note, you could envision that note as a sine wave, a wave that has both a peak and a trough, or a half circle that points up and a half circle that points down, or, a frown or a smile, different smiley curly cues. And just like noise cancellation headphones, these expensive Bose headphones that you can get if you're on a plane or someplace very noisy, the way the headphones work is they create cancellation waves that neutralize whatever waves of noise or disharmony you are hearing. So noise like this, we would play the exact opposite of all of those notes in order to bring it to a place of silence. This is cancellation waves. And this is more similar to what we do with consciousness when we find energy that is out of place or consciousness that is out of place. So this is not like a violent dismemberment or fighting with flamethrowers and machetes. This is not that type of a battle, even if it is in a semi-physical realm of imagination. What we do is send cancellation waves. It is a way of saying unmaking, like something has been made or a note has been played. And if it's not the right note, what can you do? You present cancellation waves that dampen that note. So these are effective maneuvers to be able to recondition the tapestry of time and space and consciousness, because it must be understood that right now in this galaxy there is a dis-ease, a sense of things not being at ease, things not being at peace. Not everything is flowing according to the harmonic structure of energy in the cosmos. I've spoken about this at length. Why did Atlantis happen? Hey, why did Mars happen? Hey, why did the asteroid belt happen? All of these things are symptoms of a disease or an out of balance aspect of consciousness within this galaxy. And the way that we fix things is not by kill, mutilate, destroy, chop it up with a machete. Do you understand that even if you found clank metal extraterrestrials were trying to invade, what would be the solution? Because even if we say we want to kill all of them, burn them all, that is not an effective solution. We're talking, this is birth of a new dimension. How do we do this effectively? The good news and the bad news is that Earth has already been invaded. The worst has already happened. You have already been horribly mind raped and abused for the past 15,000 years. The entire story of human history is the story of the degradation and rape of human consciousness. I'm sorry that is a negative note to land on, but the good news is that through Flying Rainbow Lasagna, you can rearrange your genes. You can write a new story for yourself and for the planet. It's a long story, so we'll continue doing this next week. Thank you so much.